Welcome to the Great Work of Your Life interview series produced by Revealing Genius. Our guest today is the executive producer and host of What's Your Work Fit, the first of its kind interactive live show bringing together business and workplace thought leaders, hiring managers, and career seekers. And what's interesting about his show is he invites guests who challenge the traditional notions of work and workplace. And he encourages his viewers to seek their own work fit. And why is that? Is because he wants work to become a wonderful part of the day, doing other wonderful things, and not the all consuming time suck of a day. His words. The live show streams and is available for playback on LinkedIn, YouTube, and is distributed as an audio podcast that streams wherever people listen. He's based in the Washington, D.C. suburbs of Northern Virginia. I am so excited to welcome Mr. Dan Smolen.
Thank you, Mary. Good to see you.
Good to see you. I was so excited to have you here on the show today. And thank you for inviting me to your show. We had a great chat just recently. We really dove into, quite a few things. We talked about purpose. What I love about your show is you ask questions that keep people up at night. So before we dive into the interview, can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of your show and how it came about?
The genesis of me in podcasting, I'll go back even further. Before What's Your Work Fit was launched 2 years ago in October of 2022. So let's go back to the summer of 2016. And I still had my recruitment firm. It was called The Green Suits, kind of a tongue-in-cheek play on the fact that I was executive recruiting, and my new specialty at the time was clean tech, quote unquote, green jobs. So thereby I was recruiting green suits being the pejorative for executive talent, if you will. And at the time, I felt like I needed to do something to better engage both prospective talent, but also hiring managers to work with my company. And so the very first podcast that I did, which was called Green Suits Radio, was intended to be sort of like a job petting zoo. What do I mean by that? I would bring on talent, and maybe it was a director of corporate sustainability. And then I would ask my guests to describe their work, how it impacts the corporation, how it impacts customers, how it impacts society, for instance. And then I got into the kind of the Larry King questions, which is what you're alluding to, that keep you up at night at 2:00 in the morning. Now, if anybody remembers the late Larry King, he was on the radio originally overnight. So if you were a trucker at 2:00 in the morning, you were listening to these existential questions that he was pondering. But the 2:00 in the morning fever dream stuff is unfortunately prevalent in the lives of very successful career professionals who worry about relevance and perfection and making a difference. And perhaps most of all, their own career success, the trajectory of their careers, which in the old model was a ladder straight up. And so after a few iterations, and I'm editing, 2016, we had a change in presidency, it changed priorities. The whole clean tech and green jobs thing was really rattled. I had to change my approach to being more of an advocate towards people who wanted to get into that work. And it sort of separated from my brand. And then my business was viable. My recruitment business was very good. But at the end of 2017, I had finished up a year of really focused recruitment for literally one very fast growing company. And so they entrusted me with hiring specialized sales talent and business developers. And I did all that. And we really just focused on that. But at the end of the year, they said, thank you very much. We're going back to a very traditional sales model, which is more like a rate card. And I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. I mean, I hired you all these really brilliant people to do high-end consultative selling, and now you're telling me you're disbanding the whole thing. And when that happened, then I realized I hadn't the bandwidth at the time, Mary, to business develop for myself, to come up with additional client prospects, if you will, because it was really just two of us in the company, myself and a contract recruiter that I had. And we were just kind of pushing really hard to fill a big bucket of open assignments. And we did that. But at the end of 2017, going into 2018, and the client contacting me, and they're nice people. And I understand, it's really not about me. It's about what they feel is best. But then I said to myself, do I really want to rebuild? Do I really want to start over again? I'm at a point in my life where recruitment is becoming so highly specialized and so reliant on technology and on investment that maybe I was not capable of doing as a small, successful, but boutique firm. I mean, we ran on a shoestring. And so over a weekend, I sat down with my wife and I said, do I really want to perpetuate this? Because the itch in me was, I want to do something different. And what is that different? So before I got paid by my client knew best. And I hired candidates who fit into their vision, into their mold of what they think success was. And I was very good at bringing in talent. But then at the beginning of 2018, I said, no mas. I'm going to have I think I described it to you, a Viking funeral. I'm going to blow up my company, going to set it ablaze, dissolve it, and focus my attention on something new. And the something new was a focus not on the hiring manager per se, but on executive level career professionals who I felt needed a voice, an advocate to help them create better outcomes for themselves. And those better outcomes weren't always remunerative. They weren't always about money, but they may have been. And I heard a lot of this kind of chatter in the years going on prior to my severing or dissolving my business, rather, that my candidates, people who I loved, people who I admired, who just had wonderful souls and were longing for something, Mary, that was evocative of a better daily experience. And that's where the idea of WorkFit came about. I had candidates, and some of whom were just like me in my early pre-recruitment days as an executive, who put everything into their executive lives. They, like I, worked sometimes 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And when they weren't at work, they were exhausted, passed out on the sofa, not really engaged with their families and loved ones and friends. And I thought to myself, this hyper-careerism is literally killing people. And so the WorkFit idea came about, which was to say, how does work become a wonderful part of your day doing other wonderful things? And as you said, not the all-consuming time suck of a day. And I was like, that's something. So 2 years ago, and I'm fast forwarding, the big pivot was going away from a full audio podcast to something that was not only video based, but live. And the reason I did that was I wanted to be immediate and I wanted to be relevant, because as good as my audio podcasts always were, sometimes I missed the mark. Sometimes it was like I wasn't talking, I was talking about interesting things, but not necessarily reflecting the hair on fire moments that an audience experiences on a daily basis. So when October 22 came along, What's Your Work Fit launched to be visual, highly relevant, and fully interactive. Because as you know, we engage our audience and they get to submit their live questions to our guests. And that's what makes this show so wonderful.
Gosh, I mean, we just had our conversation just a couple of weeks ago, and my takeaway from that experience, which you made it a wonderful experience. I mean, we had a great chat. Um, would love to do it again. My takeaway was audience was so engaged. There
Yeah.
were questions that were popping up in the chat. Folks were really interested and and wanted to interact with each other. So thank you for building this. I think it's timely. I think it's needed. I think it's urgent. And I can attest that I was one of those executives that worked 80, 90 hours a week and, wore that as a badge of courage, a badge of honor, and came out on the other side grateful for all of it, but recognize that there could be another way of being
Right.
that would
And
serve us better.
here's the big discovery. And I've been in the work world a very, very long time. What I didn't realize, even in my own experience, was how the notion of success is usually in the third person. It's how others perceive you being successful. And you know what, Mary? We all bought into that. We attended the right college programs. We got the right degrees, often advanced degrees. We went to the right clothiers to get the right look, to look corporate. We laughed at the boss's stupid jokes. And what I realized in engaging my audience and realizing in my own experience was I never owned my own notion of success. And here's the thing, we're at a tipping point right now. We're well into a tipping point. It predates the pandemic start in March of 2020. When people started to question, what does it mean to be successful? And it was no longer about pleasing others. It was about, I have this day. Do I own the joy that comes out of it? Or that could come out of it? And what that basically can mean is, I want to have hegemony over the clock. I don't want somebody looking at my badge swipes when I came in and when I left. Because you know what? That creates a psychology where, well, in order to be successful, if they're doing badge swipes, I better be in here at 6 o'clock in the morning and stay till 8 o'clock at night. That's nutty. And it sends people to the hospital eventually. That's not a work fit. What a work fit is the trust that you have in your talent, if you're a hiring manager, to own the deliverable and have trust in them that you can give them the day and they will figure out how to get all the milestones done exceptionally well that they need to do. And oftentimes, Mary, that is happening more and more in a team environment where that one person isn't left out in the cold. They have others in the beehive to help them and help themselves fulfill and exceed their objectives. That to me is a work fit. So if you get that part done right, then you don't have to miss your daughter's soccer practice, her violin recital, her lead performance in the school play. You don't have to miss your son's birthday party. Oh, by the way, you don't have to miss your haircutting appointment. I had a boss once. I think I told you about this. He had canceled so many haircutting appointments that his barber fired him as a client. That's crazy. And my boss felt terrible about it. Unfortunately, he's subsumed to the same notion that others are judging him based on their own measures of success. So I got to be tough and suck it up and miss that haircutting appointment.
Yeah, the self-care. The self-care drops to the bottom of the priority list. I put that in the self-care bucket. What a shame. And I think the folks that are listening now are all, including yours truly, because I've canceled them myself and put everything else in front of it. And I think what I love the most about the title of your podcast, what is your work fit? I mean, you're actually asking folks to redefine the definition of success. So why don't we start there? Because it's ironic. As I was looking through the questions in preparation for our chat today, I thought to myself, there's one question that I could ask Dan Smolen, what would it be? It would be that. How do you define success, Dan?
Well, let's step back and say that you start with the first person. How do I define my own success? It is to have a fulfilling life. And, over the past 40, 50, 60 years, to have a fulfilling life meant status. It meant, you've got a senior VP in your title. You drive the right car, you live in the right neighborhood, your children go to the right schools, and you send them off to the right college programs. That's not success. That's shape-shifting to make others happy. And I think we've gotten to a point right now where we're really, really understanding the cautionary tale of that, in that so many of our children's cohorts, their peers, are so saddled with college student loan debt, they don't know how they're going to get their lives in order. They can't afford housing. They can't afford to commute in from 2-3 hours away to get to a central office district because that's where the boss wants them. I mean, we're dealing with that in real time right now in this election season, where so many people feel completely disengaged from the notion of success. The model that I promote, by the name What's Your Work Fit, came out of a consulting arrangement that I had with a friend of mine. And she just uttered the question, what's your work fit? And it didn't dawn on me until about 4 minutes later. And I stopped her and I said, stop. And she got nervous. She goes, what did I overstep? I said, no. You just named the show. What's your work fit? And this is what we're all dealing with right now. How do I have a wonderful life? I want to have what I think is, to get back to your question, what I think is success is to enjoy the moments of a day, even the most mundane things, to be able to go outside and look at the garden you created and smell the flowers. That to me is success. The closer we get to that kind of Zen-like bliss, that is success. There is such a hunger for that right now, Mary, because for years we have invested so in this idea of, to be successful, we've got to start early. And we've got to put our kids in coding school, which, by the way, those are going out of business because AI doesn't need you to code. Or we have to get them to study violin when they're 4 years old, and they're crying, I don't want to do this. And you pack their activity days with everything: play practice, softball practice, swim practice, school tutoring, to the point where they're not even out of college yet, and they're already miserable. That's not success. That's shape-shifting to make others think you're successful. We don't own that. We want to own our success. You know?
That is the game, right? To live a fulfilling life. There is no other game. And it's finding your, as you say, your work fit. Your I would piggyback on that, and figuring out your purpose. Like, why do you exist? To serve, and do that, whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Mary, I confided in you. Well, I didn't really confide in you. It's not really a secret, but my daughter, who's now 23, had gone through a lot of health related crisis when she was younger. And we had to leave a community that we lived in because she was prone to falling a lot. And I had this fear she was going to fall over the second story balcony and kill herself. She was fainting all the time. So we knew we had to get her out of that community closer to better medical care, which we did. And it meant living in rented housing, living in a rental community, just because we needed to be able to shift our situation based on her needs. And it was really a great thing that we were able to do. Most people would not be able to necessarily do that. They didn't have the work fit to do that. I happen to be a solopreneur. I could be wherever I needed to be. I always told my wife, you want to move? Tell me, we'll move. I think more and more people want to have the infrastructure in place to have that kind of freedom. And it may not always be for themselves. It may be for their family members. It may be for their loved ones. I lived through hell with my daughter. It was scary. There were days I didn't see beyond the abyss. But what I did know was this. If I was working a full-time job in a co-location for a boss who looked at my badge swipes and made sure that I was in at 6 and didn't leave till 8, where would my daughter be now? My work fit is my ownership of the day and the ability to even tell my clients when I was still recruiting, hey, listen, I've got to take my daughter to the specialist we've waited forever to get into. So would you please allow me to reschedule at another time? Or maybe it was, I have to take the next 4 days off to care for her. And my clients would be like, sure, fine, we'll be fine. That to me was my original work fit. Now, was it all happy? No, but still, the work fit for me at the time was to be able to attend to my loved ones and make sure they were being taken care of and still get my deliverables done, and I did.
Start just about every coaching call with one question, and that is, how do you want to live? How do you want to live? And that might be very, very different from when you were in your 20s or your 30s or your 40s. It could look very, very different now. And to your point, it may be, how do you have to live? Like, perhaps you need to reconfigure how you live to take care of a loved one, be it an aging parent, be it a child who has a congenital issue. Yeah. So I think what you're doing, Dan, it's so timely and urgent and needed. And something happened during, I don't know if you felt this, but something happened during the COVID where there was some kind of reckoning where so many folks were starting to take a step back and asking, how can I have impact? Where can I have impact? And is it showing up in the way that I'm operating now? It does that need to look a little bit different? Thus, to your point, what's your work fit?
Well, you brought up the pandemic. What happened during the pandemic? We were all locked down. We were all on Zoom. And we were crushing it. We were crushing it. We were so efficient. And a lot of the things I'm talking about to you now, people who had never thought in terms of what I call work fit were suddenly living it. Okay, yeah, I mean, you heard the funny stories about the kid interrupting, the little toddler interrupting the Zoom chat or whatever. Yeah, that stuff happened. But what also happened is we broke the clock. I have friends who told me they were never so efficient as they were in those months working from home and managing their day. Because what they realized was, oh, I get to see my wife, my husband, my children. We can actually do stuff as a family we've never done before. It was revelatory. A lot of people got pets. Oh my God, emptied shelters. People suddenly had dogs and cats that they never had before because they felt like they couldn't, because they were never home to take care of them. And I think coming out of the pandemic, which was really interesting, was the C-suites in big companies realized, but took the wrong lesson from, our teams are really overperforming. And in those first couple of weeks and months after the lockdowns, we had all this technology and connectivity that allowed us to be anywhere and do our work. We didn't have to be in the same room, in the co-location, in the same silly meetings that were often a waste of time. Yeah, I mean, we had to learn how to do meetings remotely so that people didn't feel like it was sucking up their whole day. That was a learning process. But I think knowledge workers in particular, people that are in consulting and are in business development and don't necessarily make things, but they provide service as executives, recognized I can really be liberated, Mary. I can be liberated from the train and the office and the fact that so much of my day is sucked up in traffic on the highway or in the train, or I regained 4.5 hours a day, and I could choose. I could either use them to work or I could use them to take a walk with my family, have a picnic. See, this is really the tipping point. I think a
It
lot of
is really the
people.
tipping point. You said it as I was thinking it, so we're communicating telepathically. Yeah, and the work you do, I think the message that you're sending really needs to be heard. You're such an advocate for meaningful work, and I have a couple of questions for you, if I may. And I know our listeners are going to be anxious to hear from you. So, one big question, it's actually two questions, is in terms of the work you're doing now, what gives you energy and what drains your energy?
Well, the drain my energy is um, technology sometimes. I am so dependent upon a strong bandwidth from my internet provider and all the technology working in place. And I get drained by the fact that I have so many steps that I have to do to ensure that when I bring a show live, everything is ready to go. And what's the reason for that? I'm a one-man operation right now. I don't have staffs of people. A lot of podcasters, if they're in a corporate environment, they have staffs that can do the production, the pre-production, everything. To do the show that I do and make it look as good as it does, to make it look like a TV show, takes a lot of work. And that is draining to me. So it's all the technology. It's also the fact that I don't have more talent around me to support the social media aspect of this show. Like when I do a live show and then I have to uh, do clips of it afterwards, that takes a lot of time and a lot of preparation. I wish I had more people around me to do that. I don't have the revenue base that I'd had when I was in recruiting, so I have to make choices. And one of the choices is I have to do a lot myself. That drains me.
Yeah.
What lifts me up? What fills my sails? It's hearing from viewers of the show that say, what you discussed today on your show, I can make actionable. I can take it. I can take the ideas that you described and put them into motion in my own life. That to me is a home run. If I do that If 5 people a week find that, I feel like I am batting 1,000. So it's
Brilliant.
those
Love it.
messages that I get from viewers, sometimes listeners, sometimes people that follow me on LinkedIn or who I'm in contact with on LinkedIn, and I hear that kind of feedback. Oh my God, that fills my sails.
Excellent. And by the way, you can connect with Dan Smolen on LinkedIn, and I believe it's your name, Dansmolen. So just go to LinkedIn, Dansmolen, and you can connect with Dan on LinkedIn. I'd love to talk to you about your superpower. And one of the questions is, where have you spent 10,000 hours honing your superpower? Because on LinkedIn, I mean, you have a really rich, interesting background. You're an author, you're a podcaster, you're a talent and workforce expert, you're a gig guru, if you will.
Yeah.
You're all about sustainable business. You have done things in marketing and sales. And now I see you, the way I would present you is you're an advocate for meaningful work. So, in your words, where have you spent 10,000 hours honing your superpower?
Oh gosh, you make me sound like a polymath. I'm not. I'm really not. But I have always loved doing is writing. And when I was a little kid, I wasn't a great student. I was terrible at math, good at geometry, really bad at everything else. But give me a pencil and a pad and tell me to write a story. And even as a little kid, I was able to do that. So I've always made writing a part of my life and being able to express ideas well. And it's hard work. I mean, you do it every day. I look back at stuff that I wrote 20 years ago and I laugh because it was like, oh, that's kind of biting. But I put a lot of effort towards writing every day. It's therapeutic for me, but that's my superpower if there is one. And it connects into how I do the posts that I do on LinkedIn and on social media. And certainly the live show that I do is in order to write, you have to ask really good questions. And I've learned from the time I was a little kid to ask really good questions. So maybe that too is a superpower. I don't know. I'll leave it to others to decide.
Yeah, so if I may, I mean, you are an amazing storyteller, so it doesn't surprise me that you would lean into the writing skills because you're very, very good at you are a raconteur. The yes, storyteller. So writing makes perfect sense. I have
Thank
two
you.
more questions, and then we'll pause, and then we'll go into the bonus question.
Okay.
Um, the the next question is, what would people be surprised to know about you, Dan? I've got to know you pretty well, but I'm interested in hearing the answer to this question.
That I'm the domestic in the household. I do all the cooking and cleaning. I grew up in a family that, well, especially around cooking. I mean, I have 2 brothers. My dad, my 2 brothers, my dad's dad, and I all love to cook. And I'm not an experienced chef, so to speak, but I really take a lot of pride in creating a meal that whoever I'm serving will love the experience. Maybe that's why I like cooking shows so much. The storytelling's often really good. I take I that love of cooking, that love of food, of presentation, of storytelling. Um, yeah, yeah, the fact that I cook and clean, it's a big surprise that people don't know about me.
I did not know that about you. Good to know. Very good to know. I am a horrible cook and even worse baker. So I have great reverence and respect for folks who are really good cooks. And my husband and I often we joke about our sort of our, the stereotypical role reversal. I
Yeah.
mean, folks say, I married him because of his cooking skills, and
Oh,
he
well.
married me because of my contractor grade tools that I have.
Well, there you go. Well,
Yeah. So
my mother, oh my God, she was such a wonderful baker. She's still around, 94. She doesn't bake anymore, but oh gosh, I mean, the stuff that she would bake and would fill the house with aroma. I love that. I was like, I want to do stuff like that too. So when I was a little kid, she would teach me how to do stuff.
that's great. It's a wonderful skill. Yeah. Something to pass on. it's generationally.
Oh, yeah. And when my daughter was younger, uh, 6 years old, really, we would make apple pie from scratch. That was our thing. It became a tradition at Thanksgiving. My daughter and I would always bake an apple pie from scratch, and that was I think what I love most was the shared experience and we still talk about it. The fact that you know I would be cutting the apples, and while I was cutting the apples, she would be eating the raw dough when I wasn't looking.
I
You
like
know,
her already.
yeah, you know,
That's great. Wonderful. Another question. We talked about this before we got on at the top of the hour. Um,
yeah.
what is a book? We'd like to get your advice because I see behind you, behind your left ear, there you have a stack of books. And so be really interested in narrowing the field for you. What is a book, Dan, that inspired you to behave or think different?
It's such a good question, and here it is. I had to look up the title because I didn't want to muck it up. The title is In an Uncertain World, and it was written about 30 years ago by Robert Rubin. Robert Rubin was then the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury under Bill Clinton. And what the book is about is probabilism. It's not if something will happen in an uncertain world, but what are the odds that something will happen? Probabilism was in the wheelhouse of people in high finance, in commodities. My brother was in the commodities trade for most of his career. Oh, yeah, absolutely. You had to use probabilism. What has happened now, Mary, is that probabilism is informing today's real-time workplace. It's using AI especially to guide along best outcomes. And it's also using the study of probabilism to understand the big things that we have to deal with right now. I'm just going to focus in on the work world. Work is a lot more complicated. The workplace is a lot more complicated right now because it used to be that the co-location, the company headquarters, the main offices, that's where you worked. There was no getting around it. Nobody worked virtual. Nobody had computers. You got on the train at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you took the train into the big city, and you walked to the office, and you did your thing, and you went to your meetings, and everything was pretty structured, and everything was pretty ordered, and actually kind of paramilitary ordered, with rank and file. The workplace is so disrupted now with remote technology enabling us to have this conversation, and we're arguably 1,000 miles away from each other, that we can do work at any time, anywhere, lots of different ways. That is so disruptive as to create a huge amount of uncertainty in the lives of people who work. So I think the study of probabilism will help us at least start to understand these big issues that we have to deal with. And if you're running a workplace, the big issues are where should we gather and when and why? It's no longer a given. Well, we're just going to have the big sales kickoff in the office. Well, maybe not. Maybe we go elsewhere. Maybe we do it remotely. As a team, we have to figure this out together and really study the known unknowns to come up with better outcomes. So I'm pulling this book off my shelf again to revisit because I really believe especially with AI, fleshing out a lot of new insight that we never considered before. Because, AI can take over a lot of the deliberative querying that normally people would do, and people are prejudiced because they have their own ideas and they don't consider everything. AI has no boundaries. It's really going to help us wrestle with the probabilistic issues that we haven't even thought about right now. And oh, by the way, perhaps our biggest beyond the workplace is climate. And we talked about this, about your backyard, about my family in Asheville, North Carolina, having to escape in the last couple of days, and my friends. Um, Probabilism is going to have to factor into so much more, not just work and workplace, but how companies operate, how they relate to the world, and how they respond in such a way as to not make the world a worse place, but a better one.
Yes. And you even say that in your LinkedIn profile that you're not only an advocate for meaningful work, but you're an advocate for quote unquote making the world a better place. And it really does shine through. Thank you, Dan, for being here. I wanted to pause for a moment. I have one more question, but I wanted to pause for a moment. Is there anything else you would like to add?
This has been a delightful experience. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. The honor is mine. I really appreciate it. This next question, I'm really anxious to hear what your answer is. It's we call it the bonus legacy question. It goes like this: if a higher power, so quote unquote, and that's whatever you deem it to be, if a higher power would let you do, be, have, see anything you want, and there are no limitations, no financial limitations, no geographical limitations, no mindset limitations, what would that look like for you?
If I could go back into time and sit down with my ancestors, in particular my father's father's family in Ukraine and their people, want to thank them for the life that I have, for making me possible, and the sacrifices that they made to allow my grandfather to immigrate to the United States alone and have a true American dream life. Arrive at the immigration center in Boston with lint in his pockets, and within 25 years, be a pillar of his community, building his own house, having a car in the garage, and sending his oldest to Wellesley College. 25 years. I would want to go back in time and thank those people, but I can't. And the sad part is that I believe they all perished in the Holocaust. I believe they all did. We don't know, because we think they died at a time where their village got mowed down by the Nazis pretty quickly, and all records of the community and them were destroyed. I'm about remembering people that are past, and I offer them a lot of gratitude. I hope I didn't end on a downer. I hope I didn't end on.
No,
a downer,
I was pausing for effect because I was taking that all in. Beautiful, really beautiful. It speaks volumes about your brand, Dan. Thank you so much. So, gosh, we could talk for hours. Friends, you can find more information on the great Dan Smolen on his LinkedIn profile. You can go ahead and link with him directly. And also, if you are interested, and I highly recommend, go ahead and check out his wonderful interview series. It's live, it's interactive. It's called What's Your Work Fit? And you can access it on LinkedIn, or you can also access it on his YouTube channel. What's Your Work Fit? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Friends, please help me in thanking Dan Smolen. It was great having you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.